Max Verstappen just got eliminated in Q2 at Suzuka. The same track where he dominated for years. The same track where he made history. And now, he couldn't even reach the top 10. But that's not the real story. The real story is what he discovered right after. Because this wasn't driver error. This wasn't strategy. This wasn't even a bad lap. This was a hidden flaw inside the RB22 that even Red Bull didn't fully understand. Until this moment. A problem so serious, it's costing them around 1 full second per lap. And here's where it gets worse. His own teammate, a rookie, made it into Q3. Same car. Same conditions. Completely different result. So what is really killing the RB22? Why does the car change from one lap to another? And how did Verstappen realize the truth in the middle of qualifying? Because by the end of this video, you'll understand why this is not just a bad weekend. This is the moment Red Bull lost control. Subscribe now, because the final detail explains everything. It actually started long before that final lap. Long before the radio message. Long before the shock of position 11. Because if you go back just a few hours, everything was already pointing in the same direction. Final practice. The last chance to understand the car. The last chance to fix it. And instead of improving, Red Bull made the situation worse. Verstappen finishes outside the front group. More than a second behind the leaders. And that number matters. Because in Formula 1, a second is not something you recover with a better lap. It means the car is fundamentally off. But inside the garage, they still believed they were close. They thought it was just oversteer. Too much rotation. The rear stepping out in high speed. A clear problem. A solvable problem. So they reacted aggressively. They changed the setup overnight. Tried to calm the rear. Tried to give Verstappen more stability. And on paper, it made sense. But on track, it revealed the truth. Because the car didn't get better. It transformed. From oversteer to heavy understeer. From nervous to completely disconnected. And that kind of shift is dangerous. Because it tells you something very specific. You're not fixing the car. You're chasing it. Every change pushes it in a different direction. But never in the right one. And this is where Verstappen starts to feel it. Not just a lack of grip. Not just balance issues. But something much harder to deal with. Uncertainty. Because the car doesn't behave the same way twice. One corner, it bites. The next, it washes out. Then suddenly, the rear steps in again. No pattern. No consistency. And for a driver like Verstappen, that's the worst possible scenario. Because his strength is precision. He drives on instinct. On knowing exactly how the car will react before it even does. But now, that connection is gone. And Suzuka is the last place where you want that. Fast corners. No margin for hesitation. You either commit fully, or you lose everything. And Verstappen couldn't commit. But here's the key detail most people missed. This wasn't just happening in one part of the track. It was happening everywhere. Different symptoms. Same root problem. And that's when the engineers started to realize something uncomfortable. This is not a setup issue. Because if it was, the changes would move the car in one clear direction. Instead, every change created a new problem. Which means only one thing. They don't fully understand the car yet. Even internally, they admitted it. There are elements of the RB22 they still haven't figured out. And in Formula 1, that's critical. Because if you don't understand the car, you can't control it. You can only react to it. And by the time qualifying begins, that lack of understanding becomes visible to everyone. But what happens next is where the situation inside Red Bull starts to get really uncomfortable. And this is where the situation inside Red Bull becomes impossible to ignore. Because qualifying doesn't just confirm the problem, it exposes it. Q1 begins. And immediately, something feels off. The car looks slow. Not dramatically slow at first, but uncomfortable. Unstable on entry. Late on rotation. Every corner looks like a compromise. Verstappen pushes, but nothing connects. The lap never flows. And at Suzuka, if the lap doesn't flow, you're already losing time. He barely makes it through. 11th. Right on the edge. And that's the warning. Because when a driver like Verstappen is fighting just to survive Q1, you're not dealing with a small issue anymore. But there's still one last chance. Q2. New tires. Track improving. Everything to play for. And this is where the truth fully reveals itself. First run. Same problem. The rear doesn't settle. The front doesn't respond. And in Sector 2, it gets worse. High speed. Fast direction changes. The exact place where confidence matters most. And Verstappen can't commit. He lifts. He hesitates. Tiny corrections, that cost everything. But here's the key moment. Because while Verstappen is struggling, the timing screens show something nobody expected. His teammate, a rookie, going faster, cleaner, more committed. And suddenly, the pressure shifts. Because now it's not just the car. It's the comparison. Same team, same conditions, different outcome. And that creates doubt. Not from outside, from inside the garage. But Verstappen still has one last attempt. One final lap. Everything on the line. And this is where the discovery happens in real time. He goes through Sector 1. Decent. Not perfect. But alive. Then Sector 2. He turns in. The car moves. Not once. But twice. Unstable. Unpredictable. And in that moment, he understands. This is not something he can drive around. This is not something he can fix with commitment. Because the car is not giving him a limit to attack. It's giving him a limit he cannot trust. And then, the radio. Clear. Direct. No hesitation. The car has a big problem. I can't rely on the rear anywhere. I can't push in high speed. We have no pace. That's not frustration. That's confirmation. Because by that point, he already knows. This lap doesn't matter. The result is already decided. And seconds later, it's over. Position 11. Eliminated. At Suzuka. But the real impact is not the position. It's what happens immediately after. Because while Verstappen climbs out of the car, his teammate is preparing for Q3. Let that sink in. One Red Bull, out in Q2. The other, fighting in the top 10. And now the question becomes unavoidable. What is the RB22 really doing? Because if the same car can produce two completely different outcomes, then the problem is not just performance. It's behavior. And understanding that behavior is exactly what Red Bull still hasn't figured out. And this is where the real answer begins to surface. Because once Red Bull started comparing both cars, lap by lap, corner by corner, a pattern appeared. Not obvious at first, but impossible to ignore once you see it. The car behaves differently, depending on how it's driven. Not just slightly. Fundamentally. The rookie adapts. He accepts the instability. He doesn't fight the rear when it moves. He anticipates it, allows it, and then controls it. Small corrections. Smooth inputs. Less aggression on entry. And that keeps the car inside its working range. But Verstappen doesn't drive like that. He never has. He attacks. He commits early. He relies on a planted rear, a sharp front, instant response. That's how Red Bull built their dominant cars. Around that exact style. But the RB22 doesn't reward that anymore. It punishes it. And that's the key difference. Because when Verstappen pushes, the car falls out of its window. When the rookie adapts, the car stays within it. And suddenly, everything connects. The inconsistency. The balance swings. The lack of confidence in high speed. It's not random. It's conditional. The car only works if you drive it a certain way. And even then, only barely. And internally, this is where the realization hits hardest. Because this is not a driver issue. And it's not just setup either. It's the operating window. A very narrow one. So narrow, that even elite precision can't consistently stay inside it. And that explains everything Verstappen felt. Why one corner feels fine, and the next feels completely different. Why the rear suddenly disappears, without warning. Why the car moves underneath him. Because aerodynamically, it is. The floor is not stable. The downforce is not consistent. And when that happens, the car doesn't give feedback. It gives surprises. And at 200 miles per hour, surprises are unacceptable. That's why Verstappen said he couldn't trust it anywhere. Not just in one corner. Not just in one sector. Everywhere. Because the behavior is not predictable. And for a driver like him, that's the real limit. Not speed. Not grip. Trust. And once that trust is gone, lap time disappears with it. But here's the part that changes the entire picture. Because if the issue depends on driving style, you can't fully solve it with setup. You can only mask it. Temporarily. And that means the real fix is much deeper. It's in the design. The floor. The aero platform. The way the car generates and holds downforce. And that takes time. Weeks. Maybe months. And while Red Bull works through that, every race becomes damage control. Every qualifying becomes a risk. And every lap becomes a question. Not of how fast the car is, but whether it will behave at all. And that leads to one final, unavoidable conclusion. Verstappen didn't just experience the problem at Suzuka. He understood it. Completely. And once a driver reaches that point, there's no going back to guessing. Only waiting. Waiting for the car to become something he can trust again. And this is where everything stops being technical and starts becoming strategic. Because once Verstappen understands the problem, the next question is no longer what is wrong. It's how long it will take to fix it. And that's where the situation becomes critical. Because internally, Red Bull already has an idea. This is not a one-race issue. This is not something you fix before the lights go out on Sunday. This is a development problem. A deep one. The kind that lives inside the concept of the car. The floor. The aerodynamic platform. The very thing that defines how the car behaves at speed. And if that's where the issue is, then every solution takes time. Wind tunnel testing. Simulation work. Correlation checks. Manufacturing new parts. And then, hoping they actually work on track. Weeks, at best. Months, more realistically. And Formula One doesn't wait. That's the problem. Because while Red Bull is trying to understand the car, their rivals already do. Mercedes. Consistent. Predictable. Fast. McLaren. Sharp. Stable. Always improving. Every weekend, they extract performance. Every weekend, they score points. And Red Bull is searching. Experimenting. Reacting. And that creates a gap that grows silently. Race after race. Lap after lap. Because even if Verstappen drives perfectly, even if he extracts everything possible, he's still limited. Limited by a car that doesn't respond. Limited by a platform that breaks outside a tiny window. Limited by something he cannot control. And we've already seen the consequence. Over 1 second per lap to the leaders. That's not just a performance deficit. That's a championship threat. Because over a full race distance, that gap becomes massive, unrecoverable. And suddenly, the conversation changes. It's no longer about winning. It's about surviving, minimizing damage, staying in the fight while waiting for solutions. But here's where it becomes even more uncomfortable. Because history doesn't favor situations like this. When a team loses understanding of its car, recovery is never immediate. Sometimes it takes half a season, sometimes more. And by the time performance comes back, the championship is already out of reach. And Verstappen knows that. That's why his reaction was so calm. That's why there was no anger. Because this is not a moment you fix with emotion. This is a moment you endure. But there is still one final piece. One detail that connects everything we've seen. The practice struggles. The setup confusion. The qualifying collapse. The radio message. The difference between both drivers. All of it points to one single truth. A truth that explains not just Suzuka, but the entire direction of Red Bull in this new era. And once you see it, you realize this is not just a temporary problem. This could redefine the balance of power in Formula One.